Hello, my name is Susan Piver. I'm a writer and longtime practitioner and teacher of Buddhism. I've come to see that many people think of Buddhism and meditation practices associated with it, like mindfulness, as ways to reduce stress. But I would like to tell you that the Buddhist path is far more rich than that. It is a way to wake up, to become liberated from suffering. And forget about enlightenment, it's also a way to live your everyday life more fully and meaningfully. This podcast is to share with you classical Buddhist teachings that I have found enormously beneficial, and also to tell stories from my own life about how I applied and misapplied these teachings. And I do want to tell you from my more than 30 years of experience that the Dharma is real, and it provides an extraordinarily nuanced, profound, and pragmatic guidebook to living a life of wisdom, compassion, and courage. Welcome to the Buddhism Beyond Belief podcast with me, Susan Piver, or welcome back if you've listened to previous episodes. I rather unexpectedly took a few weeks off because I wasn't sure I had anything to say. That's the real reason. We're moving to a new house, selling a house, and we bought a house, and now we're moving into that house. And it's had a very strange effect on me. Moving to a new house, for me anyway, has created a lot of complex feelings. First, I'm lucky to have a house, so let me just say that. And second, it's a weirdly clean slate. Like, who do I want to be in this new house? What habitual patterns do I want to try to shake? How do I make this feel like home? What does this light switch do? We're still in that phase of this house. Our previous house, we still own because it's on the market. And a few nights ago, I was sleeping in this new house. My partner was away, and I started to feel very agitated. Like, I don't know I don't know what the light looks like in this room in the morning. I don't know what this light switch does. I'll just say that again. This doesn't feel familiar. I really want to just sleep somewhere that feels familiar to me and grounded and like home. So I got up. It was like 11 o'clock at night, put on my bathrobe and got in my car and drove to the house that we're selling. Got in that bed and felt, oh, this is not right either. This is not my house anymore. This doesn't feel comfortable or comforting. So I got back up after about an hour in my bathrobe and drove back to the other house and tossed and turned, feeling unsure about where I was and that my time-space continuum was broken, which in the Buddhist view is a weirdly fortunate thing to experience because you're sort of booted out of habitual patterns. In any case, I didn't make any podcast episodes during this few-week period because, as I think I said, I didn't have anything to say. I didn't know what to say. I felt weird and sad and super moody. So, I couldn't do it, but now I'm back. So this week's topic, and I'll tell you how I came up with this idea, is, do Buddhists pray? I thought about this because in the Open Heart Project, Sangha, Open Heart Project is my online community. You are very welcome to join. Sangha, which means community, is a group of about 500 people who practice together, study together. We have book clubs, we have online programs, we have online retreats. And the best thing I would say about the Open Heart Project Sangha is that we can practice together in real time every day, 7 days a week. A different teacher shows up at 9 a.m. East Coast time. Sometimes it's me, but most often it's not. There are other deeply trained, truly wonderful, really smart, really not weird and creepy, really deep teachers who guide a practice in the morning for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then there's time for conversation for another 20 to 30 minutes. It's not recorded, so everybody can feel free to talk about whatever's on their mind. It is the number one factor that supports people to be consistent in their practice, is to have some place to show up turn on their computer in this case, and just get guidance. So it's really wonderful. Anyway, about a week ago, one of the participants brought up the topic of prayer and wondered, do Buddhists pray? That's a very interesting question. She said she was brought up Catholic. She still has great love for the Catholic faith, and she loves prayer. She's always loved it ever since she was a girl. And she wondered in a Buddhist community, or she ever became a Buddhist, quote unquote, which no one has to do, would prayer be contraindicated? And of course, the answer is no. I mean, there's a difference between being a Buddhist and being a Catholic. And though it would be lovely to think, well, you can do both, you can't. And I'll tell you why in a second. However, you can be a Catholic and do Buddhist practice. You can pray to God and still have a meditation practice in the Buddhist tradition for the following reason. Catholicism, as I'm sure everybody knows, is a theistic religion. There's a God. You pray to him. He has preferences. He has things he doesn't like. Okay, no problem. You can still practice meditation in the Buddhist tradition because Buddhism is non-theistic. There is no external deity. There is no set of rules or laws that came from somewhere else in a God realm. There's rules and laws and all sorts of ideas, but there's no belief system rooted in an external deity, which is why you can be a Catholic and practice Buddhist meditation. You don't have to choose between gods. It's also why you can't be a Buddhist, this is how I was trained, and a Catholic. You're going to have to pick one, should you ever arrive at that point, because you can't be a theist and a non-theist. It would just create a lot of confusion. It's not because it's against the law or you'd be a bad person. It's because it would be very confusing to practice a non-theistic tradition and a theistic tradition at the same time. So short of becoming a Buddhist, quote unquote, you never have to make any such choices. So do Buddhists pray? Well, the answer on one hand is no, because there's no external deity. Who would you be talking to? There is no one out there, according to this view. On the other hand, the other answer is yes. If you go to a Buddhist temple, you will most likely see a table in front with pictures and images and incense and offerings, and there are all sorts of depictions of various deities. Some of them are white, doesn't mean Caucasian, it means they're just, the color of them is white. Some of them are blue, some are red, some are green. Some are peaceful and lovely and wow, I'd really like to be with you. And some are fierce and have fangs and wear necklaces of skulls, and you're like, whoop, what's going on over there? A little scary. Some have more than one head, some have 1,000 arms. There's all manner of depictions of various deities. And should you sit down in such a temple and look at this shrine table with all of these images on it, you might be wondering, well, am I supposed to talk to them or do I pray to them? What do they think of me? Am I doing okay? You know, the questions that most of us who were brought up in Judeo-Christian traditions probably have when thinking about deities. So the instruction here is when you look at these depictions, whether it's images or statues or paintings of various kinds, the instruction is you are looking at yourself. When you look at these beings, the fierce ones, the peaceful ones, the ones with 6 heads and the ones with 100 arms and the ones that look peaceful or wrathful, you are looking at yourself. You are looking at your own wisdom, the brilliance that each of these images points to is a reflection of your own brilliance. You're looking in a mirror. There is no separation between you and these deities. Now, it can be very hard, at least speaking for myself, to remember, wow, I'm awesome. I have all these great qualities. I possess profound wisdom. I am capable of indestructible compassion. I have all the courage in the world that I might ever need. Wisdom, compassion, and power. These are the three qualities of the awakened mind that each of these deities represents. They all represent wisdom, compassion, and or power or courage. The wisdom, compassion, and power that I forget I have. And when I look at them, I can be reminded, actually, I do have those qualities, or maybe I do, even though I'm not quite sure about it right now. So the encouragement in the Buddhist tradition that I was trained in is to gaze at these figures or feel their presence in some way, not in a woo-woo way, but in some way that makes sense to you, and make a relationship to it, commune with it, recognize the inseparability of you and these deities. Now, that can sound arrogant. It isn't. In the practice that I do most days, it's called a nundro practice. Nundro means preparatory. And there are many nundros throughout the Vajrayana Buddhist world. And each one centers on a certain deity or wisdom figure. Often, the nundro practice, as it's called, begins with some opening salvos, things along the lines of, I'm going to do my best. I don't know if I'm up to it. Please hear me. Please help me. And among the traditional salvos is often something called calling the Lama from afar. Lama meaning the ultimate teacher, the great teacher, whether it's someone you know or someone you read about or someone you just feel connected to. There's a sense of you invoke your own longing for wisdom, for liberation, to cease suffering and be able to benefit others to do so as well. Calling the Lama from afar, which is often what it's called, contains a line in the particular practice that I do that says, other than my own continuous mind, I could not find my Lama. Since there is no object to pray to and no subject who is praying, why should I pretend to pray with contrived thoughts and grasping effort? Clear, unidentifiable, naked, empty awareness is what's here instead. I made up that last phrase. So I'll just say again, other than my own continuous mind, I could not find my teacher, my wisdom, my guru, my enlightenment. So there's some sense in Buddhist practice of really emphasizing the continuous nature of mind between you and the various deities that you might encounter. So it's more focused on communicating than beseeching, being with the wisdom itself rather than asking of it something, which of course you're entitled to do too. That's not a problem. But this kind of prayer is more like hanging out with than anything else. So there are liturgies that with the actual prayers, like calling the Lama from afar, or various practices meant to deepen the dialogue between you and wisdom itself. But the prayer also takes more material forms, like if there's a shrine and you put a flower in a vase on the shrine, the flower in the vase becomes a prayer itself. I offer something beautiful. If you have the capacity to be consistent in your practice, which is not easy, but the consistency itself is also part of prayer. I'm still here. I'm showing up. We're still together. I'm still in dialogue with you, is the kind of prayer I'm talking about. If you respect the space that you inhabit, whether you live in a room or a castle, by keeping it clean and beautiful and, whatever's beautiful to you, if you adorn the space with your heart and your care, the space itself becomes a prayer, a way of communicating, in other words, with the energies that are present. Another great way to think of what is meant by prayer in this particular Buddhist view is by noticing what happens when you listen to music. If you've listened to this podcast before, I love music. I love listening to music. I am not a musician, but I am a music lover. And if you put on a piece of music that you love, doesn't matter what it is, all that matters is that you love it, and you give yourself to it, meaning you just listen to it. You don't listen for what you think of it, but you just enter its flow and you hear the chord progression or the tempo or the instrumentation or the quality of the vocal, whatever it might be. And you don't think about anything else. You just listen. This is the best prayer you can ever have, I think, or the best example of what is meant by praying in the Buddhist tradition that I have been trained in. We're not asking, although I have plenty of things that I would like, as much as we are tuning in, listening, opening to, and letting it carry us. There is something very real beyond your conventional thoughts and the material world that you can touch and smell and feel and so on. There is something animate and living in the space you inhabit, in the feeling of the clothes on your body, of course, in the trees and the dirt and the air outside, wherever it is you live, in the objects you possess. There's a sense of something animate. And prayer, in this sense, is communing with what is animate in the rooms and the circumstances and the sense perceptions and the feelings that you encounter. That's prayer. So, do Buddhists pray? No, and yes. So I hope this has been useful and interesting. I will do everything I can to return to consistency in this podcast. I love making these episodes, by the way. In case you're wondering, I don't have a script. I'm not even sure what I'm going to say. That's the good news and the bad news. But it's a joy for me to reflect on the wisdom that I have received and make the effort to share it with you. So if there's anything that you would like to discuss, please tell me. I would be so happy to hear your questions, your reflections. You can DM me on Instagram, susan.piver. You can ask me anything via a form. There's a link to it in the show notes. And I look forward to remaining in dialogue with you and together between you and I and wisdom itself. Thank you for listening.